Hi, this is John with theinfosheets.com. What I'm going to do today is give you a walkthrough of our customer database. It's basically a database designed for a small business, and that small business could have point of sale or be after the fact invoice entry, such as a carpet cleaner, a plumber, a service, any other type of service company, including a lawn service, or a point of sale, such as a hairstylist or an auto mechanic, or even a carpenter that has to have multiple lines for each job. The reason why we can do that type of item is that this bottom area, and each one represents a particular job done on a particular day, can pop out if we want it to. And in the case of the auto mechanic, we can have multiple lines of items, and each item can have its own cost, and that'll change our total charge. However, and we can also, by the way, choose that it's taxable or untaxable. However, you can also, let's just go ahead and delete some of those lines. Okay. However, you can also do a single line entry, and that single line can be simply a carpet cleaning. So the beauty here is that we can have a quick entry type of situation. One of the nice features is that if we enable this automatically insert pay date to match completion date and amount paid to match amount due, is for after the fact data entry, such as our carpet cleaners. When they type in an amount and then go to the next field, it'll actually generate that. So we can actually do quick entry. So that wouldn't be good if you were doing point of sale, but why have these extra fields if you don't need them for the quick entry? And the reason is because they'll auto-generate for you. And the nice thing is, if you do have an accounts receivable, you simply don't have that amount paid. It'll generate an accounts receivable invoice, so you can do a billing situation. So now let's look at one of the main advantages of this particular database, other than how nice it is to enter particular jobs on it, and that is all of the other functions it has. In fact, it has more functions than I've seen in any other database, yet is in a presentation that makes it very easy to understand. The more that you have clicked on the show, the more that will show in the invoice. Let's look at the invoice summary here, and we can see that all three of these are showing on that invoice, and one of them is not paid. In that case, it's generating an accounts receivable of that $225, and it's showing that it's due on the 26th. And let's see, those three that I have clicked, and this is the one that is not paid. We can also choose different types of invoices, and those invoices will later be either emailed or printed or saved as. And emailed, it'll automatically attach it to your email. Let's go ahead and look at some other type of invoices, and we'll choose Invoice Detail. And one of the things about Invoice Detail, jobs that don't have detail cannot be printed that way, because that wouldn't make sense, would it? So the carpet cleaners aren't, and we'll go ahead and do the two hairstylists, the two hair jobs. Alright, for the hairstylist. So let's go ahead and view that invoice, and you can see how still that one that isn't paid is showing as an accounts receivable, and it shows everything that we've done for this particular client. We can also generate that on a receipt printer, and let's go ahead and view that. And this is basically a receipt printer that is in that, what did it say, 57 millimeter, and we can set our individual printer for each different report here of the receipt style, so that therefore you don't have a universal receipt printer. Generally doesn't have the ability to print full size, so you'd have to switch printers all the time. So that way you don't have to do that. There's different types of receipts, one with margin, one without, and 80 millimeter, so that various different receipt printers will work. The receipt printer that we have chosen for our design was or tested with was the Star TSP100, if you want to give a receipt printer that we've already tested through our system. However, most receipt printers will work in a standard format such as this. If you don't have a receipt printer, you can use a full-size page, and that looks like this. once you have chosen your receipt, you might choose to email that. And the nice thing about the email is that it's actually going to generate the email, the to line from our customer email here, and then it's going to attach a PDF. In the subject line, I would imagine you'd say something like, please review the invoice that we have attached and pay any balance below, and then probably put a PayPal button in your signature line. Or I believe PayPal has a form on Microsoft Outlook, a free button that you can attach, and that'll insert a please pay now. And that's probably the best way to get, that's the best way of getting electronic payments. They're a very useful company. And then, okay, so we've gone through our invoices, so let's look at some of the other great functions we have. And that might be our appointment calendar. And then we might also see our click to map function, which is a very unique function, in that it'll find the customer's address and put it on your current web browser. In this case, I believe it's Google. And then it searches there. Let's move on. Basically, these are normal buttons that you might see on any type of database, but let's go ahead and go to let's go ahead and go through them. The first button here says Save Record. That is not really necessary, but let's say you were data entering and you typed in a new customer. If you hit Save, it'll save, but you don't have to. Just navigating away and back, it is basically saved. Basically, it's an on movement that causes a save event. So when you move it out of this, it'll automatically save. But sometimes people might decide they're going to walk away from their computer, might hit the save button, and then they can leave for a few minutes and come back if they're halfway through data entry. And that way, if something does close it with the big red X, and it won't be able to save it, you would have it saved at your place. Okay, so now let's look at our search function. And our search function, we have the ability to go whole field or any part of field. And generally I do any part of field. That way we can use partial names or partial anything really. I'm going to do round because I know there's a few browns. I'm just going to show how your partials work. We can see how it's finding the different names there. Okay. One of the things we sometimes see is people don't understand, if you have the cursor sitting in a field and hit the search button, it wants to search that field by default. Change it back to the name of the whole database, which is called customer. Okay. That way you're not just searching company for round. Alright, let's navigate to the last one and show you how a delete button works. Basically, you delete. Alright, navigation is first record, last record, preceding, following. Let's go back to beginning record. And then, because it's the most complete record that I've generated for the test. And let's do a print preview. You can see how this print preview is specially formatted. So it's not really printing the screen, which would be multiple pages wide, multiple pages long, but really a grab and go kind of print. And this grab and go kind of print will actually generate you money if you bring this to the job. I've never brought something to the job and not been able to talk to people about what they've done in the past without something happening. A hairstylist might have it to say that last time we did, a hair dye, and that's been a year or so. A carpet cleaner would see what 4 rooms they've done, and now they're only booking 3. So they might say, we've usually called this 4 rooms. So you usually have an advantage to having your data with you. And finally, we have an editable customer form. And this is basically designed when you are the owner of a company and want to be able to edit things, highlight things, and something like that. But you can also read, and it'll have the same information that I'm just telling you now. Let's go back through. We've seen the receipts. Now let's go ahead and look at our other reports and the company information. And this is where you can change your tax rate. You can change that button to automatically copy the dates and the amount paid. And you can change your address, and we can change our company name. Okay? Let's go ahead and close that and show you where it's taken effect. And we can see that if we view an invoice, we can see that now the top of the invoice has your AAA code. The same is true for your email. It'll say the subject line. We'll go ahead and click it. Why not? It'll say current invoice from AAA code, for instance. Okay. Let's go back and let's now check out some of our reports. We have multiple types of reports, and these reports are very well designed in that they have date filters for them. And these date filters are saved. So on closing and coming back. But you definitely might want to change them so that you get from today forward, for instance. And let's go ahead and go to 2015, and we'll see all of the great amounts of works we got scheduled for the next year and 3 months. Oh yes, we're going to be busy, busy beavers. We have one job to do. So there you go. And you can also choose to do that with your accounts receivable. In this case, we're going to see what accounts receivable we have coming up. You can see that we have a paid on date, and this is sloppy record keeping because they still have an amount due. Let's go ahead and correct that. So someone has a paid on date but no amount paid. And there we go. So I partially entered something. Alright. And let's go back to look at that. Alright. So now they have not paid us. And they need to owe us some money. Poor Miss Jones, she owes us so much money. Alright, so now let's look at our income and sales tax. These are all the people that have paid us. Now the reason why we have sales tax is because a lot of people, it needs to have a total sales tax for an entire quarter, and this will do that. So you can generate all of your quarterly sales tax receipts, and this is from your income. So you'll be able to pay the government that amount of money for, because you want to, because you love them. Alright, so now let's see, we've generated all of our reports. Let's go ahead and do an import-export. And the import-export is based on Excel, which is the most important way of exporting and importing because you can import anything into Excel. Once it's in Excel, you can then make it work with import into our database. Let's go ahead and look at our what you need to have to export. And before you import data, you should export a copy of that table so you can see the correct headings to use for your import. If you go into your document folder and you go into the info sheets folder, that's where it's initially installed. It'll generate the report, the Excel file of the export right there, and this happens to be it. It's the one that's most recent. And then you can see this is an export of our customer information. You can also export the job table and the job expanded table. That job was the summary line. The job expanded was the summary line expanded or the itemized. Okay? So you will have those three different tables, and a table is simply a storage area for all of that data. So this was the customer table. And if we had new data, we would simply arrange it in the same line, leaving the headings alone. So we would put nothing in our customer ID number, unless you do have a customer ID number and you're starting from scratch. Just be sure you don't duplicate the numbers. But you can also leave it blank, and it'll just import, it'll create its own number for you. You don't want to, let's undo. Generally, images are not an importable, exportable item. So for that reason, delete this out. And it will cause an error report because you can't really import an image by that little information. It won't import that way. So it'll only create an error report, but that's not so bad in that it'll simply say this particular part of this particular file did not go in. Well, you are deleting it anyway, so what's the difference? But why have it do a pop-up telling you you've made a mistake? Alright, so let's go ahead and pretend that we found all of our information and we're going to paste it, and I'm just going to call this person Jones. Okay? So that's our entire database. We have one last name. Go ahead and close that. And now let's go ahead and import that. And this is just telling you how important it is to be careful. And now we're going to browse for that folder, file. And there it is. And now it is imported, but in order to see it, we would have to close our database. And that is just, that other screen was just Thunderbird telling me that I'm not logged into the server. That's fine. Don't have to be for to show you how to log into Thunderbird. Let's go ahead and reopen it and navigate to the last record, and there's the Jones that we had, and we'll go ahead and delete them back out. And why haven't I done this earlier? But let me disable speakers. Alright, so that's basically the import-export. Let me flick back on this and talk to you a moment about the importance of this. Before you should do this, you should always copy your database. Importing is very dangerous in that you could, certainly if you're leaving off ID numbers, you may duplicate your data. If you paste things in the wrong columns, you'll get data that's not where it's supposed to be. For instance, you might put the last name in the company name. And then if you delete the heading name and then try and retype it, you might type it a little spelled wrong. So that's why I always want you to export to Excel. And once you see that, duplicate the, maybe just copy that heading row and paste it into your data and rearrange your data to be in those headings. Or put it on a second page and then later delete the second page after you compare the two. But before you do that is make sure that you back up your database. So let me talk for a minute about how you back up your database. You notice I closed the database and you can see this is your file. One of the things people sometimes see and they get confused is you see the second LAC. That just means it's open and it's basically creating another inference of it running. So once it's closed, there it goes away. Now this is your database. You can copy that, put it in another folder. Do I have a blank folder to put it in? New folder? Alright. And paste it here. Oh, it's already there. And then you can basically open it from there. Once it's pasted, you might rename it with a current date. One of the things about renaming something is your shortcut properties is actually looking for the file with this particular name, but it's very easy to just change its name here and the shortcut will work, or keep the name the same in the file. Okay? Now let's talk about the installation and the uninstallation. The installation is very fast and it's very efficient because it's separated. The database is actually separated from the engine that's driving the database. And the engine that's driving the database is called Microsoft Access Runtime. It's a very good engine that is a free download. The purpose of having it separated is because I need to be able to email our database, and if you saw, it was 1.2 megabytes. So it's an emailable file, and you can even send it to someone to work on if you needed to have them edit your data for you. But because it is that way, you do have to install Microsoft Access Runtime, and the link is on my website. It is free. It's an engine made by Microsoft for databases. And let's go ahead and do the install and uninstall. You notice that right now I'm hitting the setup.exe, but it's installed, so it gives me only option of repair or remove. We're going to remove it. Okay. Now when I hit the install, It's going to go through the EULA. You can read it. It's pretty standard. Accept the terms that basically you're not going to copy this and give it away to friends. And then install, typical. And as long as you have the Microsoft Access runtime on your website, it should work for you. And on your website, on your computer. And now we have the icon again. And go ahead and open it, and all is beautiful and it works perfectly. So I hope I've shown you how efficient this database. It's a very nicely designed. I don't think you even need a tutorial because all the buttons are pretty self-explanatory. It's a very easy to use database, but it's about as full features as you can imagine. I've seen a lot of databases out there in the last 4 years of the development of this database and its progression as it's gotten more and more complicated without even getting more and more expensive. But I think that this end result is probably as perfect as you can get. By having a database, a business is going to make more money, it's going to be more efficient by being able to see all of your income of any period. You'll be able to plan better for the future. Having your customer information is very useful. For people that are not computer savvy, think about hiring someone to do your data entry for you. I pay approximately $75 to $85 to have a stack of 200 invoices entered for me, and that usually gets me through a quarter. And so for $100 every quarter, I have my current copy of all my customers, and I think it's very efficient for you to do as well. Just having this will make your business thrive a lot more. So I hope you will enjoy using this software. If you don't want to, if you want to test it further, the website has a trial version. It's restricted to 10 individual customers before it'll tell you please purchase. But it's fully functional, so you can see everything that works prior to purchasing. The current cost is below $100, so it's not at that multiple $1,000s that is often found when people privately develop. So I think you'll find this database very functional for your business, very useful for your business, and very full-featured. Thank you. This has been John Hilbrands with theinfosheets.com.